The 2015 Charleston church shooting stands as one of the most harrowing and significant events in recent American history, bringing to the forefront critical issues of racial hatred, gun violence, and the enduring legacy of the Confederacy. This tragic event occurred on the evening of June 17, 2015, at the historic Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal (AME) Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Known as Mother Emanuel, the church holds a venerable place in the African American community, being one of the oldest Black congregations in the United States, founded in 1816 by African American members of the Methodist Episcopal Church. The church has long been a symbol of resilience, faith, and the struggle for civil rights. On that fateful night, the church hosted a routine Bible study session attended by a group of its devoted parishioners. Among them was Dylan Roof, a 21-year-old white supremacist who had entered the church with malevolent intentions. Roof sat with the group for nearly an hour, engaging in the Bible study before he revealed his true purpose. Armed with a .45 caliber Glock handgun, which he had legally purchased due to a failure in the background check system known as the Charleston loophole, Roof began his assault. He opened fire on the unsuspecting worshippers, killing 9 people and leaving 3 survivors traumatized. The victims included the church's senior pastor, Reverend Clementa C. Pinckney, who also served as a South Carolina state senator. The other victims were prominent members of the church and their community: Reverend Sharonda Coleman Singleton, Tawanza Sanders, Ethel Lance, Susie Jackson, DePayne Middleton Dr., Reverend Daniel Simmons Sr., Reverend Myra Thompson, and Cynthia Marie Graham Hurt. Each of these individuals was a cherished member of their community, and their loss was deeply felt both locally and nationally. Dylan Roof's motivations were rooted in a toxic ideology of white supremacy. His manifesto, published on a website he maintained called The Last Rhodesian, outlined his racist beliefs and his desire to incite a race war. Roof's writings and photos, which featured him posing with Confederate symbols and other icons of racial hatred, revealed his deep-seated animosity towards African Americans and other minority groups. This ideology of hatred and violence was intended to terrorize and demoralize the African American community, but it instead sparked a profound and widespread response. The day after the massacre, Roof was apprehended in Shelby, North Carolina, following a tip from a concerned citizen who recognized him from media reports. During his arrest and subsequent interrogation, Roof was unrepentant, confessing to the killings and expressing no remorse for his actions. He was charged with 33 federal counts, including hate crimes, obstruction of religion, and firearms violations, as well as multiple state charges. In a highly publicized trial, Roof chose to represent himself, a decision seen as an extension of his desire to propagate his white supremacist views. He was found guilty on all federal charges in December 2016 and sentenced to death in January 2017, becoming the first person in the United States to be sentenced to death for federal hate crimes. The Charleston church shooting elicited a profound and widespread public reaction. In Charleston and beyond, vigils, memorial services, and protests were held to honor the victims and denounce the racial hatred that motivated the attack. The unity and solidarity displayed by the Charleston community were encapsulated in the Bridge to Peace unity chain, where thousands of people joined hands across the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge. This act of unity was a powerful counterpoint to the hatred that Roof had sought to spread. The massacre also reignited a national debate over the display of Confederate symbols in public spaces. For many, these symbols were inextricably linked to the legacy of slavery, racism, and oppression in the United States. In the wake of the shooting, the South Carolina legislature voted to remove the Confederate flag from the State House grounds, a decision signed into law by Governor Nikki Haley on July 9, 2015. This move was seen as a significant step toward acknowledging and addressing the enduring impact of racial discrimination. The removal of the Confederate flag from prominent public spaces was followed by similar actions across the country as states, municipalities, and private entities reevaluated the presence of Confederate symbols. In addition to the discourse on racial symbols, the shooting spurred renewed calls for stricter gun control measures. The Charleston loophole, which allowed Roof to purchase his firearm despite his disqualifying criminal record due to a delay in the background check process, became a focal point for advocates seeking to reform gun laws. Efforts to close this loophole gained momentum, highlighting the need for more stringent background checks and improved communication between agencies responsible for monitoring firearm sales. The tragedy underscored the critical need for comprehensive gun control legislation to prevent such horrific acts of violence. The Charleston church shooting also brought to light the deep-seated racial issues that continue to plague American society. It prompted a national reckoning with the persistence of white supremacy and the systemic inequalities faced by African Americans. The tragedy at Mother Emanuel AME Church served as a catalyst for renewed efforts toward racial reconciliation and social justice. Various initiatives were launched to foster dialogue and understanding between different racial and cultural groups, aiming to bridge the divides that contribute to racial hatred and violence. Educational programs, community outreach efforts, and policy advocacy have all been part of the broader response to the tragedy, reflecting a commitment to preventing such acts of violence in the future. The legacy of the Charleston church shooting is multifaceted, encompassing the personal loss experienced by the victims' families and the broader societal implications of the attack. The resilience and forgiveness shown by the survivors and the victims' families during Roof's trial, where they publicly forgave him, became a powerful testament to the strength and compassion of the human spirit. This act of forgiveness, widely covered in the media, served as an example of grace in the face of unimaginable pain and highlighted the potential for healing and reconciliation. In addition to the immediate responses, the shooting has had a lasting impact on discussions about race relations, gun control, and the representation of historical symbols in public spaces. The removal of Confederate symbols, while symbolic, has been part of a larger movement to address the systemic racism that these symbols represent. Efforts to improve gun control laws, though met with varying degrees of success, continue to be a significant part of the national dialogue. The tragedy also inspired legislative action, with lawmakers at both the state and federal levels pushing for reforms to prevent similar incidents in the future. Moreover, the Charleston church shooting has inspired numerous initiatives aimed at fostering dialogue and understanding between different racial and cultural groups. Educational programs that address the history and impact of racism, community outreach efforts that build bridges between diverse communities, and policy advocacy that seeks to address the root causes of racial hatred have all been part of the broader response to the tragedy. These efforts reflect a commitment to creating a more just and equitable society, where such acts of hatred and violence are no longer possible. In conclusion, the 2015 Charleston church shooting remains a stark reminder of the ongoing struggles against racial hatred and gun violence in the United States. It underscores the importance of confronting and addressing the underlying causes of such violence, from systemic racism to gaps in gun control legislation. The tragedy at Mother Emanuel AME Church continues to inspire efforts toward a more just and equitable society, honoring the memory of the victims and the resilience of those affected by this horrific event. Through continued dialogue, advocacy, and action, the lessons learned from this tragedy can help to build a future where such acts of hatred and violence are no longer possible.